Are we getting close to a DHS shutdown deal? Senators Rosen and Duckworth join the Takeout to tell us when the frustration for flyers and federal workers will end. The White House says President Trump will, quote, unleash hell if Iran doesn't agree to a deal to end the war. Facebook and YouTube are found liable in a landmark social media addiction trial. Hello, I'm Nicole Killian in for Major Garrett, and welcome to the Takeout. It is another day of misery for thousands trying to fly today. Once again, Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport is enduring the longest lines. It's a 2-hour wait today. 36% of TSA workers called out on Tuesday unwilling to work without pay. Congressional leaders are still seeking a deal over funding for the Department of Homeland Security, but the clock is ticking as they are scheduled to recess for 2 weeks after Friday. And today, the acting head of the TSA testified on how agents working without pay are being impacted on the front lines.
It is a real human toll to wake up and show up to work every day not knowing how you're going to pay your bills. And so I am, of course, concerned about the workforce. And the longer this shutdown goes on and more missed paychecks, we are really putting ourselves and our workforce in a perilous situation.
CBS News contacted 532 members of Congress in their offices asking what they are doing about the partial government shutdown. It should come as no surprise that those who responded blamed the other party for the impasse. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanka has been in Houston watching the frustration fester.
What is your message to Washington?
Get some sort of compromise, but we need to make sure that we get all the people. TSA is visible because we're standing in line, but Coast Guard and other security agencies aren't so visible. They need their money too.
You're not angry with TSA workers who aren't showing up?
No. I sympathize with the fact they've got to feed their families and take care of business.
And Nicole joins us now. Nicole, I know the last time we spoke, you were, in the basement, then you moved to another level. The lines were snaking over multiple terminals. What is the situation there in Houston tonight?
Yeah, well, we're not out of the woods just yet, Nicole. And earlier today, we actually found people who were sleeping, camped out outside the TSA line behind me here in Terminal E, just to make sure that they would be among the first to be let in around 4 a.m. local to be able to pass through screening and make it to their flights in time. Earlier today, the wait times were bordering on what we saw yesterday, around 3 or 4 hours. Since that, we've seen the lines lessen, but we're not quite out of the woods yet, in part because we know that Wednesday is typically a very quiet travel day for this airport here, and things are expected to pick up over the weekend. There's a big convention here in Texas next week, some sporting events, so concern also that after TSA officials missed their second full paycheck on Friday, we could see more TSA officers outright quit. We know that over 480 have quit so far. And today, you mentioned the TSA acting administrator. She said that by Friday, TSA will have missed paying out nearly $1 billion in wages to its workers. A lot of sympathy for those workers here among passengers. We've also noted a few high-profile passengers, Nicole, including one former attorney general. This morning, we spotted Bill Barr in a very long line. He told us he had already waited about 2 hours. So everyone is going through general screening here in Houston. No TSA pre-check, no clear, and as far as we can tell, no special treatment, at least among former senior officials. There is an ADA-compliant terminal in Terminal C that's now also accommodating families with strollers. So that is a change that we've noticed.
All right, Nicole Skanka with the latest impact on all passengers, even those who formerly worked in government. We will see how lawmakers are treated if they end up at the airports this weekend. Thank you so much. And speaking of lawmakers, we want to turn now to Capitol Hill and our Torian Small. So, Torian, bring us up to speed on where negotiations stand.
Yeah, we're still at a standstill. Actually, just moments ago, a procedural vote to fund DHS failed 54-47, just not quite reaching that 60-vote threshold. Again, Democrats are holding the line, refusing to support Republicans until they get what they're asking for, which is ICE reforms. This is one that has been a pretty big wrinkle in this plan. At the start of the week, we saw that there was more optimism, considering that the president had told lawmakers he was supportive of a concept that would separate ICE funding from this DHS spending bill. When the language of this proposal came out, it didn't sit well with Democrats, considering one major component of the two components, operational components of ICE, was still being funded. Democrats maintained they will not support funding of ICE without significant reforms built into this legislation that they pass. They offered a counterproposal. Republicans are considering it, but what we heard from Leader Thune today isn't necessarily giving us the idea that they're considering it. Thune actually said there's no point in sending back another proposal because what Democrats are asking for now is what they've asked for before and have already been shot down, Nicole.
And, we heard earlier from the acting head of the TSA who testified today on Capitol Hill, along with other officials from FEMA, the Coast Guard, and other entities within DHS that are being impacted. What more do they have to say?
Yeah, I think the most striking thing is what Nicole brought up. She said the acting administrator, McNeil, said that if this continues to Friday, that's about $1 billion in paychecks to TSA agents and employees that just would not have been paid by that point, which is pretty significant. But also, she brought up the fact that even if, the DHS were to be funded again, there is also this real concern that the scale of firings or quitting, resignations so far would lead them into a deficit when it comes to hiring. So she's concerned about the future of these airports, potential shuttering of airports because they just can't be adequately staffed. And she's putting the onus on Congress to act now.
All right, Torian Small from Capitol Hill tonight. Thank you. Earlier, I spoke to Nevada Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen. Here's what she had to say. Let's start with the state of negotiations. Democrats sent a counteroffer to Republicans today. Can you tell us what was in that counteroffer?
Well, I can tell you that Democratic leadership, a group of people have been negotiating with Republican leadership and the president. We haven't seen the details of that. They've been holding it pretty close to the vest. But what I can tell you is that if the president is serious and he does care about TSA like I do and like everyone should, then I do have a bill. And if he would give the House and the Senate Republicans permission to vote for it, I'd be happy to go to the floor right now, resubmit my bill as I've done multiple times, and we could fund TSA and end this mess at the airports. It all really hinges on what the president wants and what he gives permission for the Republicans to do. They need his permission.
I know you said you couldn't share many of the details in terms of this counteroffer, but it appears that Senate GOP leadership has already thrown cold water on this Democratic offer, which apparently contains some reforms. They say it's a non-starter. So where do Democrats go from here?
Well, I can tell you what I want, which is really simple. I don't want any law enforcement agency in this country to act as if they're above the law. And for the life of me, I can't understand why anyone else would want that either. So what do we want? I want a uniform code of conduct, just like my local law enforcement have. I want training, transparency, accountability, no roving patrols, honor the Fourth Amendment. Imagine that. It's in our Bill of Rights. We shouldn't have to negotiate honoring our Fourth Amendment. Also, people should have identification and cameras. Body cameras, they protect the agent and the person that they're interacting with. No masks, like I said, transparency, training, and accountability. It's what all of our law enforcement does. I don't want ICE to act as if they're above the law. I want them to be held accountable.
In terms of that posture, though, it seems like both sides really aren't that far apart. Democrats have called for splitting off ICE funding, which Senate Republicans did in this latest offer. You have the White House's counteroffer where they did make some of those concessions that you're talking about in terms of more visible ID, body cameras, making sure sensitive locations aren't targeted by enforcement officers. Why aren't those offers good enough?
Well, I mean, I think you have to talk to leadership on both sides why they're rejecting the offers. But what I can tell you this is that Senator Murray, we've had a bill that we put up for a vote multiple times to fund all the rest of Department of Homeland Security except for ICE. In fact, the Republicans have already agreed to this because we voted on 11 budgets out of the 12 to fully fund, except for Homeland Security. So put up Senator Murray's bill and let us vote on it. But again, this all hinges on the president. Every day the president says something different. One day it's this, one day it's this, and it's not this. He's chaotic. It's his shutdown. He's controlling all of it. In the meantime, he's got us in a war that we probably shouldn't be in. He's shown no imminent threat there. And so just this chaotic nature, I don't think the Republicans know what to do because they're trying to please him. And I guess at this point, he doesn't even know what he wants.
Your colleague, Senator John Fetterman, had this to say a little while ago about the state of negotiations and how leadership is handling these negotiations. Let's take a listen and we'll talk on the other side.
What's going on is that shutting down the entire DHS because you're terrified by the base. We all knew that this shutdown would have no impact on ICE. All of the money that ICE needs was already part of the big, beautiful bill. So now why shut down all of DHS when you're not going to generate the kind of changes that we all want? I don't know. That's why I refused to do that. I made myself the only Democrat for that.
What do you make of the senator's comments?
Well, what I like to say to my colleagues, whether it's John Fetterman or all of the other Republicans, is that no one should want any law enforcement agency to act as if they're not accountable to the law. No one is above the law. And so John Fetterman's right. One big, beautiful bill did give ICE all kinds of money, more money than we give to the United States Marines. But there's no accountability in there. And what we want, what the entire United States should want, is the dignity to know that our law enforcement officers, whether they're local, state, or federal, and our military has a uniform code of conduct. Again, for the life of me, this should be something we should all want and should be able to agree on, put up those codes of conduct just like our FBI has, like my local law enforcement has. Nothing more than that. And so John Fetterman, he has a point that ICE is still funded, but I disagree with him that we should do nothing because nobody's above the law in this country, especially our law enforcement.
You referenced this earlier in the interview, but you do have a bill to pay TSA workers, although it's been blocked by Republicans. So do you intend to bring that up again?
Well, I've offered my bill multiple times, as others have also taken up my bill multiple times. My bill simply funds TSA and allows our TSA agents to become whole and get paid for going to work. I'm happy to bring that up again. And what I will say to everyone out there, and if the president is watching, Mr. President, please give the Republicans in the Senate and in the House permission to vote for my bill. I'm happy to go to the floor right now, introduce it, and if they vote for it, we can send it to the House, and boy, you can have it on your desk as quickly as they can get it done, and we can take care of this problem. So the ball's in the president's court. It's his shutdown.
Lastly, Senator, if a deal is not reached this week, are you willing to forego your recess and stay here in Washington?
I'm always willing to work to move the ball forward for my constituents in Nevada and for the American people as a whole. So I will stay here and do whatever it takes to get this done. Again, I do believe that the ball is in the president's court. Whatever he gives them permission to do will be what happens, no matter what we all talk about. So I'm imploring the president, please listen to me, listen to others, allow us to fund TSA, allow us to fund the rest of Homeland Security. Give, not us, the Democrats, we're ready to do it. We have bills for it. We can just go right out there and put them on the floor. Give permission to your Republican senators and congresspeople to do the same.
All right, Senator Jackie Rosen of Nevada, the Silver State. We thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And we turn to the White House now, where we find CBS News' Ed O'Keefe. Ed, given this current stalemate with respect to the shutdown, is the White House, or the president for that matter, expected to get more involved?
Well, as we understand it from over here, they are in touch with lawmakers up at the Capitol, monitoring whatever details of a potential agreement are being sorted through. And they understand here keenly, as everyone else does up the street, that they've got to figure out a way pretty soon here to break the logjam on this and get those paychecks to TSA workers and start making sure they get back to work so that the lines get shorter. But other than that, the president has signaled, publicly at least, they've got to sort this out. They'll let us know. I'm not terribly thrilled about this because I have ways in which I'd like this to be done, most chiefly by passing his so-called Save America Act bill that would revamp American election systems, in addition to opening up the government and getting Homeland Security funded. And yet, given some of the backroom or behind-the-scenes communications that have been going on today, it sounds like they realize they got to get to something, and they're working to get there. Whether it happens tonight, whether it happens tomorrow, we'll just have to wait and see.
And of course, speaking of another very difficult negotiation, bring us up to speed on the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, especially after Iran today rejected a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire. How is the White House responding to that?
Yeah, at least the foreign ministry, or what's left of it, rejecting it publicly, saying that there will be no negotiations. So many different ways the White House was asked and did not answer questions about who exactly the United States is engaged in, where these talks might happen, what's in that 15-point plan that may or may not have been formally presented to Iranian leadership, whoever it is that they believe is in charge, and a suite of other questions. But the press secretary did signal, of course, that the threat remains that if there are no talks, the war would continue. Take a listen.
If Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, if they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell.
So, as you can see there, keep talking to us, else the situation will only get more intense. And, of course, U.S. military personnel continues to be sent in that direction. A few thousand members of the 82nd Airborne out of the Army, 5,000 Marines, buttressing the 50,000 that are already there. Nicole?
All right. Ed O'Keefe at the White House tonight. Thank you. Retired Marine Corps Colonel Mark Cancian joins me now. He is a senior advisor for the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mark, the White House says that the president will, quote, unleash hell if Iran does not make a deal. What do you think the administration means by that?
Well, the president has threatened to strike the Iranian electrical generation system that would turn the lights off in Tehran and across the country. That would severely disrupt the economy and make terrible hardships for the people. He might attack the oil infrastructure, although that's less likely because of Iranian retaliation. The United States is already bombing the existing target set pretty hard, so it's not clear that we could do more on the target sets we're already striking.
The U.S. is expected to send more troops into the region. What impact could that have?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that the number of troops is limited. It'll be, as we heard, 5,000 Marines when they all get there, and it'll be several weeks before they're all there, plus 2,000 Army troops. This is not a large boots on the ground. It's not an invasion like Desert Storm or the invasion of Iraq, but it is enough to perhaps capture some of the offshore islands and perhaps even Karg Island, although that's a stretch because U.S. forces would have to get through the straits.
And what more do we know about those who are currently running the Iranian regime?
Well, we don't really know a lot. The Ayatollah is apparently badly injured. There have been reports he might have gone to Russia for treatment. He has not appeared in public. There is some sort of government functioning. We hear from their foreign ministry, but likely behind the scenes are the Revolutionary Guards. They have the weapons, they have the organization, and they will have an ultimate say about any negotiations.
All right. Mark Canstian, thank you so much for your expertise and analysis tonight.
Thanks for having me on the program.
Still to come on the Takeout, Illinois Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth, her view on the war in Iran and the state of DHS funding negotiations. Also, efforts are already underway to undo changes that the Trump administration has made to the Department of Justice. A former DOJ litigator joins me live to discuss some of those plans. Plus, Democrats flip a Florida state house seat in a district that includes President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Our political panel weighs in on that and much more. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Democrats in Congress are seeking oversight of the war in Iran. One of those is Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth, who pushed for yesterday's War Powers Resolution vote, which failed mostly along party lines. Earlier, I spoke with her about that and more. I want to start off first with the Senate Armed Services because I understand that they held a closed-door briefing today on Operation Epic Fury. As a member of that committee, can you share any details about what you learned?
No, unfortunately, we can't because this, and by the way, this is a tactic that the Trump administration has been using in that they are keeping all of these briefings justifying why he launched this war of choice under a classification of secret or top secret so that we can't talk to the American people about it, even though so much of the details are already out in the public realm. I can tell you that he's being enabled by my Republican colleagues and the chairman of the committee, who has basically said that he's not going to hold open hearings because the American people would not be happy if they heard the justifications, because, you know, basically there is none.
In terms of more of looking for an off-ramp here, do you believe that the Trump administration is now moving towards a deal with Iran?
Well, look, I would love there to be peace. I want this war to end. For the sake of our troops and national security and the global economy, I hope that any peace talks, if they happen, are fruitful, because frankly, Donald Trump needs all the help he can get. But bottom line, you know, some of the end state that he's talked about, like an open Strait of Hormuz, well, that's where we were before he launched his war of choice. The Strait of Hormuz were open. And by the way, Iran wasn't charging ships $1 million a ship to continue to navigate the Straits of Hormuz. So what exactly is the end state here after 13 American servicemen and women's lives and hundreds of Americans injured, and now billions of American dollars spent? An end state that is worse than where it was before he launched his war of choice. This is an unnecessary, it's an incoherent war that Trump cannot articulate a justification for. And it's put thousands of Americans in danger and sent costs through the roofs here at home. So I would love to know what the end state is. What is he negotiating towards? Because so far, it's worse than where we were before he launched the war of choice.
Particularly as we're seeing another deployment of troops, what are your chief concerns?
My chief concerns is Mr. America First, the man who got into office by saying that he would never get America into another forever war, has actually launched a forever war, because he's already put Marines on ships headed towards the Middle East. He is now calling up whole units, and he doesn't know what the end state is. You know, if Mr. Hegseth had paid any attention in the officer basic course when he was a young lieutenant, he'd know that every operations order ends with the end state. You know what the end state should be, and yet we have a war here where they don't know what the end state is. This is a disaster. I mean, that's why I'm pushing for war powers resolutions that will bring an end to this conflict before it costs any more lives and any more suffering. And, you know, by forcing the Trump administration to come to Congress and tell us, why is it you launched this war? Why is it, what is the end state? What are you aiming for? And the American people deserve to hear this, not, you know, in secret briefings where Americans can't hear about it, but in open public hearings so that we know exactly what they're doing here.
I know we've seen a number of recent votes, both in the House and Senate, on war powers, most recently in the Senate. We understand House Democrats are now lining up their own vote potentially sometime next month. But why move forward with these efforts if these votes keep failing? Is it just simply symbolic at this point?
This is us using every tool we have legislatively to force the Trump administration to come and present to the American people why is it we're at war with Iran? Why did they launch this war? And also, what are their next steps? And what exactly is the off-ramp? What is the end stage that they're working towards? I think the American people deserve to know that. And you know, the Constitution is very clear. Only Congress has the power to declare war. So they need to come to us. And that's what these war powers resolutions are doing is, again, over and over again, we're using the tools of the Senate to stop anything from happening until we get an answer for the American people.
I want to switch gears for a second to the partial government shutdown. We have seen several offers go back and forth between Democrats, Republicans, and the White House. Why hasn't there been any agreement?
Well, I think we're closer to an agreement now than we were before, but we still have to work out the details. Democrats have been very clear what we want. Basically, three main buckets. Number one, ICE cannot be wearing a mask, and ICE should be wearing body cameras. Number two, ICE cannot come onto private property without a judicial warrant. They want, Republicans really resisted this. They wanted ICE to just be able to issue itself these administrative warrants that was never issued by a judge to come onto private property. Well, you know what? That goes against our Constitution. No illegal search and seizure. And then the third bucket that Democrats want is to make sure that when there is ICE involved, violence against Americans, against people, that ICE is not the only agency that is investigating that local law enforcement can help investigate that. We saw that in Illinois, where ICE shot a young woman out the streets of our cities 5 times and then refused to let local law enforcement investigate the shooting that happened on the streets of Chicago by an ICE agent. And so those are our three main buckets. And where we are right now is the Republicans, actually, their latest offer basically comes back to what we had been asking for all along before they shut government down. Now we just want to make sure that we work out the details. So, for example, what am I wanting now? I just want to make sure that in whatever agreement, we write out specifically that when ICE wears those body cameras and when we give money to ICE for body cameras, that they must turn them on and keep them on. Because in Chicago, we saw that one of the agents actually turned his body camera off so that there would be no evidence of his wrongdoing. So right now it's in about the details and making sure that if we're going to give ICE money for body cameras, that money can't be used for something else.
And just a quick yes or no here. Will you stay in town next week if DHS is not funded?
I don't have an answer to that right now because I'm still looking to see what the negotiations and where things are playing out. But I'm happy to be here to do my job and vote any day of the week if they're going to put a vote on the floor.
All right. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Coming up, social media giants Meta and YouTube were just found liable in an historic trial. We'll break down the details and the implications of the verdict. You're watching The Takeout. Since President Trump took office for a second time, the Justice Department has undergone significant changes. The priorities of the DOJ have shifted, with critics of the president accusing him of using the department to go after his political enemies. According to Justice Connection, a network of DOJ alumni, more than 230 prosecutors and employees were fired in the past year, with thousands more estimated to have quit under President Trump. Stacey Young joins me now. She is the founder and executive director of Justice Connection. We really appreciate you for being with us, Stacey, and talk to us about some of the changes that you'd like to see.
Well, the department, if we move beyond this current administration, will need to be rebuilt and reimagined. There have been offices across the department that have been decimated. As you said, there have been thousands of career employees who've been pushed out, some of whom have been fired for political reasons. The department needs to be rebuilt in a way that is more durable so that a president in the future who believes that he is the law can't tear it down as easily as this one has.
Is that possible, though? How do you accomplish that?
I think what we're going to need to do is start thinking about it right now. And I think that the best people who are really best positioned to figure out what makes sense going forward are the career employees who used to work there, the people who worked there across administrations, who know what worked, who know what didn't, who knew what the structural infirmities were. So Justice Connection, which is the organization I run, is really thinking about what it's going to take to reimagine the Justice Department, and we're trying to involve as many former career employees in that project.
I guess I'm curious, so how do you get buy-in? Obviously, we're still quite a ways from the 2028 presidential election. Don't know if it's going to be a Democrat or Republican, who will take office after the president. But even if you come up with all of these ideas, how do you get buy-in from whoever may assume the office after the president?
Yeah, so the people who are involved in this process are going to need buy-in from the people who are running the Justice Department for sure, but they're also going to need buy-in from Congress. The Justice Department has basically existed and functioned based on institutional norms and guidelines and traditions. And this administration has proved that that is not enough. The guidelines, the traditions, the norms really need to be codified. There need to be enforcement mechanisms.
So you're saying you want something codified into law?
Absolutely. So Congress is really going to need to be involved in this process. And we believe that to work with Congress, the best people to really be doing that are the people who are apolitical, who are impartial, who worked at the department and put their politics at the door. DOJ had always functioned before this administration well because the career workforce, which is the backbone of the department, was apolitical. They were there to enforce the law, regardless of who was in the White House. And those are the people who I think will really be able to convince Congress how to pass the laws that are necessary to make sure DOJ can be rebuilt in the most responsible way possible.
And talk to us a little bit more about some of the things that you have heard from former DOJ prosecutors, employees, about their concerns with what's happening under the Justice Department in this current administration.
They're concerned that a lot of the work has been eradicated. They're concerned about the fact that offices that focused on enforcing civil rights laws, enforcing environmental laws, enforcing laws that prohibit public corruption, making sure that national security concerns were addressed. They're concerned that the priorities have been refocused to advance this president's agenda and to execute his retribution campaign. And they're also concerned that so many of our former colleagues have been pushed out. They want to see a sharp divide between DOJ and the White House. They want to see, as I mentioned before, the norms codified, strengthened, so that the department can endure the attacks we've seen over the past 14 months.
And finally, in terms of Congress, though, do you think that they will be receptive to this? I mean, we're in the middle of a shutdown, so right now, even getting the government functioning seems to be an issue. So how confident are you that Congress will be receptive to some of the reforms and changes that you would like to see, especially as lawmakers debate what they say is the weaponization of the Justice Department, depending on, which party you talk to?
I think that most people in Congress understand that the rule of law can't survive unless the principal institution that enforces it is strong, is impartial, is just, that it lives up to its name. And I think they also understand that our entire democratic system hinges on the rule of law. So I do think that they will be receptive to good ideas for rebuilding the department and making sure that it is strong enough to survive for years to come.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you for joining us, and I look forward to an update on your efforts.
Thanks so much.
Coming up, YouTube and Meta found liable in a landmark trial about social media addiction and its effects on mental health. What this verdict could mean for tech giants moving forward. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. In a landmark social media trial, Meta and YouTube were found liable for creating products that led to addictive behavior. Just yesterday, in a separate case, a New Mexico jury found Meta violated state child exploitation laws. CBS's Jolene Kent has been following this closely and joins me now. Jolene, what is the significance of today's verdict?
Well, within 24 hours, 2 different juries in 2 different states found Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, liable for harming children. And what's significant here in Los Angeles is this jury deliberated for more than 8 days before announcing its verdict. And in total, including the new punitive damages that we just got a couple of hours ago, it's $6 million that will be awarded to KGM, also known as Kaylee, the plaintiff in this case. The reason this is a bellwether case and a watershed moment is that for so long, social media companies have escaped any sort of punishment or accountability when it comes to the harming of users, allegations from users all across this country that have now resulted in over 1,000 lawsuits at the state and federal level. And if you look at the federal situation when it comes to regulation, there has been very little action on regulation of these major social media platforms, in part due to the failure of congressional leaders, as well as the companies being very powerful in Washington lobbying for a lack of regulation. And so what happened here today, Meta is responding, saying that it will appeal. But many of the families here who have been watching this go on and seeing CEO Mark Zuckerberg testify himself feel that there is a glimmer of hope here, that perhaps that this is an inflection point for holding these companies accountable for what their products do to young people.
Yeah, and speaking of that, because that was a very pivotal moment in this trial when Mark Zuckerberg testified, and there were other tech executives who did as well. Do you feel that helped or hurt their cases?
It was interesting to see Mark Zuckerberg testify before the jury, speak to them directly. I was in the courtroom when this happened, and there was a sense of great responsibility you could feel Zuckerberg trying to exude and express when it comes to the company that he founded and what it now does. He did admit, though, that the idea is to get people to spend more time on the platform. That, according to the plaintiff, was one of the reasons that she believes the programs were designed intentionally to addict her at a young age. And that's where we found the jury today finding in her favor $6 million in total damages.
All right, Jolene Kent, thank you very much. A Democrat flipped a state House seat in a Florida district that includes Mar-a-Lago, but that's not the only reason the win is gaining national attention. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. In a Florida special election, Democrats flipped a state House seat in a district that includes President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Emily Gregory won the seat that went Republican by 19 points in 2024. The catch? President Trump voted by mail in that election, a method that he has criticized. Let's bring in our political panel now. Democratic strategist Kendra Barkoff-Lamy, who is the former press secretary to Vice President Joe Biden, and Doug Heye, former communications director of the RNC. Kendra, first, I mean, how did Emily Gregory do this? How'd she flip the seat?
Look, I think we're seeing what we saw last night all across America. I think that Republicans are sending a message that they don't like Democrats are sending a message that they don't like what's happening with Trump's policies. And so I think this is not just her. I don't think it's an isolated special election. I think we saw things in Texas where there was a state Senate, somebody else flipped. So I don't think this is a one-off. I think this is a cumulative factor that people are not liking high gas prices. They are going to the polls and saying enough is enough.
I mean, Doug, in your case, do you see this as an anomaly? And also, you know, as we pointed out, the president voted by mail, yet he's pushing legislation and wants to see Congress, you know, put more restrictions on mail-in voting. So is there a little bit of hypocrisy going on here?
Well, I think we always tend to overrate what special elections mean. They really come down to the candidates and the circumstances of that district. The fact that it's the Mar-a-Lago district means Democrats are going to claim and should a huge feather in their cap. But we always look at this in a partisan lens of if we win, it means everything. If we lose, it means nothing. The vote by mail, though, I'm old enough to remember when Republicans did really well with vote by mail. We would crush Democrats. My first and second campaigns in North Carolina, vote by mail is why we won those races. And for Republicans to fall in line with Trump on this is really short-sighted, especially now that he's using it himself.
Yeah, and I want to read a statement that we just got in from the White House. If we can pull that up, it says President Trump has said the Save America Act has common sense exceptions for Americans to use mail-in ballots for illness, disability, military, or travel, but universal mail-in voting should not be allowed because it's highly susceptible to fraud.
It just isn't. And again, I go back to races I worked on, Republican races, where aggressive vote-by-mail efforts, what we would call an absentee ballot chase. We would send you a ballot, absentee ballot, and we would chase you down until you returned it. And we would know every day who would return those ballots. Was highly effective for us, and just very short-sighted for Republicans to fall in line on this. They've really lost something that was a huge advantage for them in the past.
You know, I want to turn to the latest with respect to the ongoing Department of Homeland Security shutdown. How do we get out of this? Kendra, I'm going to start with you. I mean, Democrats, the ball was in their court. They put an offer forth, but, you know, Republicans aren't really willing to entertain it.
You know, if I could say how we got out of this, I would probably not be here. I would probably be in a different job. But look, what I will say is Americans are sick of partisanship across the board. And this is a problem whereby TSA agents are having to go and donate blood in order to make ends meet. Like, we are in a place of really bad bickering, and somebody's going to have to blink first. I do believe that they should vote for a clean bill and keep ICE out. I am toting the Democratic line, and Trump needs to step forward and say, okay, we'll do this and then we'll come back to everything else. But I think Americans are sick of the bickering, and they are sick of all of this, and I think it'll reflect in the election.
But the White House and Republicans have, it seems, tried to meet Democrats halfway here. I mean, they have made some concessions. Why don't you think Democrats are going for this, or is it just a trust issue?
It is probably a trust issue, but I also think just vote to get TSA back, and then they'll move forward on other things. I know that Democrats have put that on the floor a number of occasions, and Republicans won't do that. So if Republicans really cared about, you know, the TSA piece of it, they would vote for that and then negotiate on everything else. But Republicans also don't want to lose their leverage in this bill.
Even the president, though, has seemed kind of hesitant. I know he said the other day, you know, I don't know that I'd be happy with anything that they, you know, come up with a deal with. But that being said, you know, what do you make of the way that Republicans are handling this? And do you think the president does need to get more involved here?
Well, there's a big difference between Senate Republicans and the president on this. They think they can get to a deal, and Trump says no. And we've seen that happen several times. It's interesting that some Republicans are now saying that privately. And I remember, Nicole, in 2013, during that shutdown, I would call Kendra Barkoff and say, how do we get out of this? And the reason that we would struggle to get out of it is for the very word she used, blink. If any side really makes an approachment to the other side on how to get out of this, it's going to be Republicans blinked or Democrats blink, and their base does not want blinking. They want fighting.
Is this a new normal?
It is the long time normal. It's not new anymore. We've seen this play out time and time again. It just gets more intense each time.
All right, Doug High, Kendra Barkoff-Lammy, we thank both of you for being with us. And that does it for us here on The Takeout today. The Daily Report is coming up next.